since my subjects are rather strange, I'm going to interpret these themes rather broadly, namely those in the brief that promised intercultural, interdisciplinary, and also at the same time take the opportunity to introduce some of the work of the authors who are in the Perfect Bodies volume, which just is hot off the press in the last couple of days. There were all these authors who contributed to the book. They're primarily historians and anthropologists who considered the perfection and healing of the body from the alternative vantage points provided by different exercise cultures, past and present. They discussed the core healings, the core issues of leisure and entertainment, military excellence, athleticism, health, beauty, and religion at stake in training and perfecting the body. And their messages were responded to by sociologists and public health specialists concerned with the legacy of the Olympics in our time. So let's go on a 20-minute romp around the globe and across time, imaging athletics and exercise and pointing out some recurring themes and cultural differences in sporting ideals, ideology, and training the body. So let's start with looking at some of the sports shared around the world and the context within which they were played. Leslie Dean Jones wrote that in the ancient world, every town and city that considered itself Greek made gymnasia and wrestling schools available to its citizens. The category of citizens, of course, was exclusive. Women weren't classed as citizens. Although in the case of the Spartans who did participate in athletics, other arrangements were presumably made for their athletic training. All the heavy events of the games, such as wrestling and boxing, are likely to have been dominated by those professionals who weighed in at the top end of the scale. However, the intensively trained athletic body was not necessarily a healthy body. The combat sports were also enjoyed by young amateurs in search of local entertainment in their hometowns, but actually training to the extent of being an Olympic athlete was considered by at least some of the medical historians, some of the medical professionals and writers, not to be the perfect body. Sport, in the context of the ancient Olympic Games and the Greco-Roman world, has been taken to mean track and field sports, equestrian and combat events. Where animals were concerned, the Games excluded those non-competitive activities that were an extension of the necessities of daily life, for example, hunting and fishing. Thus, some leisure pursuits were distinct from competitive athletics and the arts of combat. Special place was given to the mastery of horses in the tradition of military manoeuvres. Although there is less research available on sports in ancient China than for classical Greece and Rome, we know that teamwork arising from military contexts also extended to working together with the animal world. In hunting and animal taming, training can be seen as pitting human skill against the beasts, yet cavalry and charioteering also represent the appropriation of raw animal strength and speed in order to enhance and extend human capabilities and increase military power. Unlike the classical European world, in ancient China, only those sports that were an extension of the military arts, such as equestrianism, charioteering, and archery, were considered suitable for a gentleman of the pre-imperial warrior class. And in the imperial world, that's beginning with Qin Huangdi, the first emperor in 221 BC, sources condemned hunting and gaming for the sake of pleasure, spectacle, or entertainment, as being activities that could waste resources, lead to corruption and division, and bring on moral decay in society. No doubt, the lavish displays associated with hunting and sports intensified the uncomfortable social disparities that were created by newly accumulating wealth at the beginning of the empire. There are many, many, many murals showing sporting activities from this period. There is scant evidence of organised ball games in the classical Greek world, least of all football. The Greeks apparently preferred competition with two opponents rather than teams. What evidence we have suggests an easy informality and family fun. Whereas some sports like running could develop only limited parts of the body, Roman ball games such as harpastum, which is a kind of piggy in the middle, I think, not only privileged manual dexterity, but were good as an all-round conditioning of the body, as well as for training hand-eye coordination. Galen was of the opinion that they were generally good for one's health. Ball games were particularly recommended to remedy the physical inertia of scholarly lives, something we all ought to pay attention to, with a little healthy competition, adjusted to individual levels of fitness and allied to intelligent strategy. The same can be said of China, where you see some scholars at kickball instead of football, actually, to distinguish it from the modern game. It's called Cuju in ancient China. And it was deemed a good indicator of a soldier's potential. And in Han times, which succeeded the first emperor's short-lived dynasty, kickball was classified under the category of military writings in the imperial bibliographic treaties. There are also records of the guards playing Cuju in the palace, here depicted in a much later picture, but at least you can see, probably here scholars actually, around the emperor. And where the layout of the pitch, and those layouts are in the book, contain symbolic representations of the regulatory functions of the state. Between the 7th and 16th centuries, records, and particularly the manuals of the kickball societies, tell us a great deal about the social, cultural, and religious values attributed to the sport, its Confucian ethical framework, its hierarchies, and its prohibitions. Reading through the prohibitions, one can see a certain tenderness to rowdiness, drunkenness, and womanizing that we might recognize from modern times. As today, players in competitive ball games attracted erotic attention. Oh, here are children, family fun. Can you see the bites of two, the 100 children picture? And here, so players in competitive ball games attracted erotic attention, some achieving great renown and inspiring flights of poetic fantasy. Particular pleasure seems to be taken in the female game and mixed play, where noble women and girls participated despite their bound feet. And in the Yuan and Ming periods, women prostitutes and acrobats even achieved professional status and established their own societies. The Chinese version of the glorious game was evidently more than just physical training. It was not only a competitive sport that functioned in empire building, it was associated with pleasure and enjoyment, and requiring little investment in its most basic form, was a popular sport across social classes. I've skipped across the kinds of sports we find in ancient and medieval China, but what of the different representations of the body itself? The contemporary mirage of an all-pervasive biopower can easily lead us to believe that there is only one single conception of the body that has emerged in the Western tradition, an ontological and scientific truth that dominates all other expressions of our physical experience, one based on a Greek muscular body that leads into the anatomical body, beginning with Galen, and culminating in Renaissance anatomical discoveries, and then, of course, all the observations of modern science, governed at all stages by the tyranny of the eye. It's easy for those seeking to underwrite a history of modern science to forget, for example, the cosmic man of the European medieval and Renaissance medical tradition. In this highly selective memory of the past, images of the body that reference metaphysical phenomena seems peculiar to the Asian traditions. Charts representing Chinese acupuncture, with its depiction of the yin and yang channels that model diurnal, lunar, and seasonal change in the body, and Arabic models of the stella, the constellations, as well as the esoteric traditions here in this Chinese model of the body, with its indwelling spirits. All these images identify different bodily structures that interlink the human condition with the larger movements in the universe. Sadly, I've no time, and I'm not quite sure how I'm going to click this, because usually I use a mouse. Oh, it's doing it itself. Good. Sadly, I have no time to talk about qi today and its critical importance in linking the Chinese concept of movement and the body and its physiology with heaven and earth, or I will have my qi cut off. Here, in this little film from one of my PhD students, Michael Stanley Baker, we see the character of qi with the steam at the top and the right at the bottom relating to nourishment. Qi in brief was that vital fluidity that animated the world, the body, in particular its inner dimension, that of the sensory world, and in exercise and athleticism served to describe the experience of that internal focus and physical intuition involved in perfecting movement. What we have seen there, though, and including that acupuncture model, is the static models. of the body, images of static bodies. But what about the gymnastic body, which might serve as a point of comparison to the Greek and Roman sporting body that we've heard so much about? The medieval murals in the Thousand Buddha Caves or the Morgul Caves at Dunhuang, a trade hub and cultural centre on the so-called Silk Route, attest to the well-known glorification of the martial arts and their association with popular entertainment in 3rd to 11th century Buddhist iconography. What is surely the most vivid celebration of fighting in a Chinese Buddhist context decorates the lower half of at least 7 of these caves that were excavated between the 3rd and 6th centuries in the form of hundreds of what historians of Buddhist art have called yaocha, a kind of genie. Yaocha translates the Sanskrit term yaksha, literally the wondrous thing, genie or spirit of non- and pre-Aryan and Vedic ancient Indian religion. In Dunhuang, the yaocha is a unique form of fighting genie that seems to protect and entertain the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. Instantly recognizable by their corpulence and grotesque features, the yakshas frequently have fearful staring eyes, stocky bodies and pot bellies, and carry musical instruments. Dancing, singing and playing are their favourite pastimes, and as with the asperas, human beings are thought to derive pleasure from them, sometimes of a sexual nature. This beauty, the beauty of these images is reflected in the contemporary wrestling pits in the Akras of contemporary North India, where Lalu, in the background there, oversees traditional wrestling performed within a Hindu religious context. So that image of the body is retained into the modern times as one of perfection. We should not discount the importance of temple performances in the development of fighting skills. Festivals and open-air spectacles formed an essential point of contact between the temple and lay communities. According to one Buddhist record of a Luoyang temple, in front of the temple there was a military ground. At the end of the year, when there was a break in the agricultural work, armoured knights made military manoeuvres. Thousands of chariots and riders were often there. Oh, I haven't got to that bit yet, but with my images. But anyway, we'll see it in a moment. Wealth accumulated from donations from faithful members of the local elite attracted by these performances, or taxes levied by the monasteries, made a religious institution powerful and ready to invest in the defence of its states. Monks took up arms to protect their community, and religious sects were often perceived as a threat to central government. They needed to form strong alliances to defend a monastery's assets. That need was also at the foundation of the relationship between the Tang, that's the 7th to 10th century emperors, and the abbots of the Shaolin monastery, who we'll all have heard of. This was just a picture of a Dunhuang gymnast, clearly not Chinese, so it's a testimony to the different types of people that are moving in and out of that end of the Silk Route. Legend has it that Shaolin Gong Fu dates to this period. In fact, the bare hand and stick form fighting associated now with this Buddhist martial art emerged much later in Ming times, when Buddhist martial and performance arts fused with indigenous therapeutic traditions concerned with the cultivation of qi. And in the here is actually images of Dunhuang. Do you see the child on the end of the pole there? These are pictures of performance and sort of festival. And here's a Han mural, and you see the child on the top of the chariot there. So when we get, and this is Han to child acrobat. Okay, and there's the military processions. And some hunting pictures from Dunhuang as well. Okay, here we are. In the 18th and 19th century, we see a proliferation of different schools and styles of martial arts, not the least as a village-level response to banditry as a result of civil war and famines of that period. But anyway, just going back a little to this Buddhist Chinese art. Harsh physical training under the influence of Indian esoteric Buddhism and under the tutelage of the tantric cult of Vajrayana hardened the body and even the penis until its surface acted as a kind of magical diamond shield to the body. In the fusion of Chinese and Indian religious and sporting culture, we see the emergence of representations of the muscular body. The image of Vajrayana illustrates the inseparability of military and religious goals in the Chinese martial arts. no less than their indebtedness to Indian esoteric Buddhism. To a modern eye, there's an irreconcilable contradiction between the religious quest for physical invulnerability, as represented in the practice of forging the diamond body, and Buddhist practices that are apparently dedicated to non-violence. This kind of body practice still is very vivid in Beijing during the Tiantan festivals, that's the Heavenly Altar Park, and there's an annual festival. Here you see the hardened body in lurid demonstration with it's a mallet that he's holding above there. See, the brick breaking happens all over the place in these festivals, and there's another one here. Oh no. Okay, I only gave you one. The statue of Zeus, the first emperor's terracotta army, his guarded and mummified corpse, the delicate balance of Discobulus, and the diamond body of Vajrayana present us with visions of immortality, deathlessness, transcendence, eternal youth, the power and dignity of a graceful old age, and the gods in our image. The drugged and invincible body also defies immortality with the promise of performing beyond human limitations. We've got a great article about enhancement, sporting enhancement with drugs. Lest we think that the preoccupation with immortality is an irrational pursuit of the pre-moderns, it's good to remember that we are closer to immortality than ever before, our life expectancy being almost triple what it was in medieval Britain. With our longevity also comes the expectation of more life, not only in length of years, but also in the sustenance of youth and beauty into old age. Sporting activities have always invited the imagination of this supernatural dimension and our reciprocal association with the gods. Even before 7th BC, athletic events performed part of the attractions of religious festivals at Delphine, the Mere, and the Shrine of Poseidon at the Isthmus of Corinth. And I stand absolutely to be corrected by people in the audience. I have a very superficial understanding of this. Not only did the spectacle attract an audience from the Greek diaspora around the colonies as far away as Spain and Africa, it also drew a divine audience. The anthropomorphic conception of the gods in the ancient world meant that what entertained and pleased a human audience would also be gratifying to the gods. But coming down to a more basic level and an important modern concern, at what point do we see a concern emerging for exercise and universal or public health? Greek works describe exercise for different physical constitutions, but it wasn't until the 16th century and the influential work of Girolamo Mercuriali, a passionate historian of the sports cultures of the ancient world, De Arte Gymnastica, which was the first book-length monograph on sports medicine that recommended universal fitness throughout. 200 years after its first publication, let's just quickly look at some images from there. 200 years after its first publication, his work was to inspire Johann Gutsmuth, who Christine Nutten describes as one of the founding fathers of physical education in the modern sense. He had a new vision of the moral and physical benefits of exercise, which owed much to Mercuriali's combined classical and medical authority. Greek athletes represent the epitome of individual and heroic physical capacity and endurance, figures of awe and wonder. But the Mercuriali effect was to use those images to inspire those who were concerned with health for all. At the end of the 19th century, this idea of national fitness became particularly potent against a background of newly emerging modern nation states. There is no single conception of the common good in relation to health, and we can explore this theme of national fitness in the late 19th and earlier 20th century in the decades running up to the modern Olympic movement. Here we see a mounting concern about physical degeneration, differentiated on racial grounds, in a newly patriotic context. In the eyes of the Russians, the political decline of the Ottoman Empire meant that Turkey had become the sick man of Europe. With the decline of the Chinese Empire, the linking of physiological and physiognomic qualities to the political degeneration also became ever more explicit and led to the imagination of China as the sick man of East Asia. In the first half of the 20th century, anxiety about racial and national decline fueled a new craze among Chinese intellectuals for building the body, framed as a collective responsibility. A healthy nation resided in a healthy population. An advanced society expressed itself in the upright posture of its members. The influence of Christian organizations and the movement nowadays known as muscular Christianity instilled in Chinese youth the sense that individual health, physical fitness, and national reconstruction were closely linked with the modernization of China. Fitness was the key to intellectual and moral development, and Olympic-style sports were the physical activities of choice, both for the medical press and in the eyes of the emerging middle classes. It became fashionable to be seen at the sports club or the YMCA and to play competitive games associated with the West. Indeed, my own father, as a teenager, he was convinced that the Western moon was rounder. He hung out at the YMCA and learnt tennis at the Fuzhou Missionary School in the 1920s, while the martial arts were still dominating the sporting activities of the youth in the hinterland of China, who were destined mainly for the army and for the public security services. In the modern era, the pursuit of the perfectly honed and trained body, the drive to outperform others for one's own personal sake, is still enshrined within the culture of the Olympiad. But the success of our athletes cannot be disassociated from their wider representation of the success of nations and national pride. They are role models for us to admire and aspire to. Yet, and let me come to an important aspect of my own research, do the Olympics have any real impact on population health? Do they inspire us to move? Some studies tell us that they do not. Audience participation in sport, and more importantly, the participation and overall health of the population more broadly, has been shown to be negatively affected by the Games, in the short term at least. The Games increase TV consumption so that normally active people become couch potatoes, eat more fast food, just as they seem to be doing in the piazza, where was it? We had an image earlier of Romans eating junk food. They drink more alcohol, and reflecting the negative aspects of competition, sadly, staff in battered women's shelters report spikes in domestic violence during sports matches. The threat of terrorism affects lives directly, and higher levels of tourism cause environmental pollution and lead to an increase in prostitution, STDs, so that the health equation of the Olympics is, at least temporarily, negative. What are the long-term effects? Is inspiration enough, or should we not be investing in other exercise and sporting cultures to address contemporary forms of indolence? Adrian Renton, who was here a little earlier, points out how, despite massive evidence to prove the beneficial effects of exercise, only a tiny, really tiny amount of government money is spent on promoting physical activity, when compared to the investment in the more nationally lucrative pharmaceutical research. And this is arguably the most important challenge in global health in the near future. Finding population levels associations between behaviours and health outcomes is, however, notoriously easier than successfully changing those behaviours. Perhaps we have something to learn from the Chinese example. Let me return for a moment to the relationships of animals and sport, and here, particularly in the mimicry of animals. Oh, am I done completely? Okay, okay, we'll flick through it then. So why are we still doing so little? That's the evidence. This is the amount of money that's spent, not very much. This is a very early, I think, a 126 CE rhapsody, and it describes how to move the body like the animals and the importance of it. Here we have my major research, which is the exercising the body here on the right-hand side, which is a 2nd century BC silk manuscript excavated from a tomb south of the Yangtze. Here's the bear walk, and that's something that my father used to do every day, and millions of Chinese still do in the parks. I wanted you to do this, but, another day. It's like this. Okay. And there's a focus on the bear walk. We don't want that one. There's my martial arts teacher. Basically what I'm saying is that, what am I saying there? They've demilitarized the martial arts, basically, and made it socialist for the health of all. And, of course, it came out with all of China's great cultural icons at the beginning of the Olympics. All these people doing Tai Chi, young people doing Tai Chi in the stadium. Here is my current Tai Chi teacher, or one of them, and I went to the Kaiguan ceremony where they open a dojo or a martial arts place. Now, what I wanted to say was this combination of religious and sort of military and martial local government, Chinese medicine, is that they're getting a great deal of investment, and partly it's so the party cadre can go on nice holidays in beautiful places. This is Dujiayan, the core of the Sichuan earthquake a couple of years ago. But in any case, at the same time, these outfits are receiving money to teach, in this case, 20,000 children the martial arts every day in Sichuan. So it's working. It's getting people moving. And here are the animals that we know most of us might have some impression of in Shaolin Kung Fu. And is this one going to start? Okay, I'll finish with this, although I could go on forever, as you can see. But these kind of massage movements are allied to those early therapeutic exercise and sports movements that I study in the 2nd century BC. Some of them, obviously the context is very different, and they're understood very differently by the people and the communities. As I said, in this case, there's a sort of socialist principle behind the practice. But the techniques, many of the techniques are the same, and the movements are associated with other things like self-massage, diet, etc. So, it's one area where a bit of intercultural interaction might do us here good. Thank you.